the kind of contestations over democratic structures and the politicization of the judiciary. And in a sense, the discussion around the possible politicization of the ICT and the way in which it may be used to persecute and harass political opponents, that being seen as one other perspective on it, also really shines a light on the processes within, the routine processes rather within the judiciary, and its structural limits to seeking justice within the legal system. I want to just look very briefly at some of the struggles around independence of the judiciary and the executive's repeated efforts to dominate the judiciary practice and back the courts and ensure its total control over the possibility of setting standards and seeking remedies. In the almost 4 decades since we've been an independent nation, through the periods of continuing transition I spoke about, the Supreme Court has been repeatedly the focus of public attention, providing a forum not only for redress of rights against the oppressive state, but also carving out, with greater or lesser caution at different times, parameters for determining relations between the state and political parties, and more recently, in the last 20 years, the duties and obligations of the state, the people at large, and, of course, carving out its own notions, very controversially, increasingly, of the public interest. The court's approach has oscillated between permitting full frontal challenges, followed by correctives to executive excess, in the face of flagrantly arbitrary action and clear constitutional breaches. But this approach has also marked efforts made to safeguard the court's own autonomy and independence. Experiences of executive control and interference in the Pakistan period, and of course prior to that in the colonial period, clearly informed the framing of express provisions in the post-independence constitution of 1972, which mandated independence of the judiciary and its separation from the executive at all levels, the lower judiciary and the Supreme Court. However, amendments were made to the original constitutional provisions under autocratic rule under, unfortunately, Sheikh Mujibur Rahman in 1974, and then under military rule under General Zia and Irshad from 1975 onwards. And that meant there was a failure to overhaul the inherited institutional structure, and we saw the continued intervention of deeply embedded vested interests, which were further exacerbated by overt politicization of the court, and new constitutional arrangements which enabled involvement of the senior-most members of the judicial and executive, resulting at various points, for example, with Chief Justices, and I'm happy, I think, history we probably share with Pakistan of Chief Justices serving as Chief Martial Law Administrators, for example, and more latterly in their new guise as caretaker chiefs as well. And that whole process has certainly diminished and curtailed the scope for the court to operate with full independence. Some of the ways in which these basic principles were eroded through law and practice, let me just hop and skip very quickly through them because I do have an anxious sense that I'm losing some of you already. But one of the not guides would be fantastic, so we'll just carry on. But one of the first of these was enhancing the President's powers to the detriment of the Chief Justice under the Fourth Amendment in 1974, which imposed one-party rule. And then, very critically, fragmentation of the entire Supreme Court by the Eighth Amendment under Irshad, under effective military rule. And then, more interestingly perhaps, indirectly by the 13th Amendment, which was passed by elected government, the Army League, introducing the caretaker government system, which envisaged a role for the judiciary and the executive, as well as in every level through interference with the appointments process. The court fought back in 2 or 3 quite critical cases. The first of these, the Eighth Amendment judgment on Anwar Hussein's case, the court established for the first time the basic structure doctrine and identified that a unitary Supreme Court was part of the basic structure of the Constitution of Bangladesh, and it was able to bring back all of these courts, all of these benches of the High Court that had been sent off to remote areas where they had not a single copy of the Constitution usually, and a couple of dog-eared copies of various law reports, and no lawyers who had ever practiced in constitutional law but were determining suddenly constitutional rights and obligations. So the court was restored. And the other critical judgment, and here there are very clear parallels with Pakistan, and indeed this entire case really drew its entire sustenance and source from Pakistan, was the Mazhar Hussain judgment, a case which was brought by a member of the subordinate judiciary asserting that independence of the judiciary needed to be formalized for the subordinate